Hey there, Bruno Larida here with Larida Consulting. I had a great time interviewing the incredible Professor Yehuda Shoenfeld recently. We covered some mind-blowing topics on the latest advances in autoimmunity. It's called Everything You Wanted to Know About Autoimmunity, but Were Afraid to Ask. Now, since it's a 45-minute interview, I thought it'd be best to break it down into 3 parts and release one each week. So whether you're into watching videos or reading transcripts, I got you covered. I hope that you'll enjoy it. And this is part 1, why certain individuals are more prone to developing autoimmune diseases. I'm Bruno Larida with Larry Bio Consulting, and today my guest is
Yehuda Shoenfeld. I'm a physician, researcher, and a teacher in the field of autoimmunity, the founder of the first Center for Autoimmune Diseases in the Sheba Medical Center in Israel, and the organizer of all the congresses of autoimmunity in the world so far, and the co-editor of about 45 textbooks in the field of autoimmunity.
Well, Professor Schoenfeld, this is great to have you with us today. What time is it for you at the moment?
The time in Israel is exactly 8 o'clock in the morning. It's the eve of the second holiday of Passover, which takes about
Excellent.
8 days.
Well, thank you so much. I think I've known you for about 23 years. The first time I met you, if I remember well, was the Antiphospholipid Syndrome conference in Orléans, in France.
That
And
might be correct because you are a young person with a good memory. In my memory, it looks like I know you from the time you were born.
that's probably the case, yes. So one of the subjects that I wanted to approach with you was I'm not going to ask you to summarize the last 23 years in autoimmunity. What I would like to know is just what is new in autoimmunity at the moment. What are the last trends?
So I can talk mainly about my field in detail. Basically, the big revolution in autoimmune field was the fact that the biological therapies were developed, and it changed the therapy of patients, brought in a way a kind of cure to many patients, but definitely to better life. In my side, the revolution is more concentrated on the etiology and understanding the mechanism of autoimmunity. Understanding the mechanism may enable you to develop novel therapies. And we have coined a syndrome which is named Asia syndrome, which is in detail autoimmune syndrome induced by adjuvants. This syndrome may explain why we develop autoimmune diseases and thus unable to counteract and maybe prevent and maybe predict autoimmune diseases in subject in the future.
And any new development as well on the diagnostics side?
Yes. So we understand today why Mrs. X or Mr. Y, less than Mrs. X, develop autoimmune diseases. Actually, more than 83% of autoimmune diseases, and there are 100 of them, they differ by the organ that they are involved in, but they are the same. So 83% of them are involved with young women at the childbearing ages. The reason for that is, as we will detail later on, is because women have a better, more aggressive, more beneficial immune system. So they react better to invading agents like viruses and bacteria. The reason why women have a better immune system is because they are more important in evolution. They are the incubator. This is the reason why, for instance, during the corona pandemic, 40% women died by 60% men. Moreover, this is the reason why women outlast men. As I say to my wife, that when I will die, she will be able to marry two Russian oligarchs. Be it as it may, this carried out to understand that basically all autoimmune diseases are genetically determined. This means that you need to be born to the proper father and mother. This is the reason why autoimmune diseases run in families. Not necessarily the same autoimmune disease. The mother may have type 1 diabetes mellitus, and the son may have a skin disease called pemphigus vulgaris. During the years, this issue, namely to answer why a specific subject is more prone to develop autoimmune diseases, was deciphered, and it was published in an unknown journal called Nature. It has been found that the genetic markers, which may be specific genes like PTPN22 or HLA markers, which are contributed from both the father and the mother, and specifically HLA-DRB1 haplotypes, which are notorious in making you more prone to develop autoimmune diseases. They characterize persons which are similar to women, namely that they have a better autoimmune disease and a more aggressive immune disease. This gave these people actually advantage in evolution. They could find plagues and other invading agents better. But like the women in the childbearing ages, when they are confronted with something that stimulates very aggressively the immune system turns into chaos and turns its weapons, which are autoantibodies like measles or autoreactive cells, against their own tissue and organ constituents. So basically, to understand who and why we develop autoimmune diseases is the genetic and understanding that having a better aggressive immune system is good. It is an advantage in daily life. But if you are exposed to something which stimulates the immune system very aggressively, you may pay the toll for this advantage, and you may develop autoimmune diseases. So what are the environmental factors which can stimulate so aggressively and so vigorously the immune system? They are many. And therefore, we have published our book, The Mosaic of Autoimmunity, which lists many of them. It's a book of more than 500 pages. And they start from the sun rays to stress. Basically, these are infectious agents. In the past, the notorious virus, which was known to associate with at least more than 30 different autoimmune diseases was the virus of the kissing disease, infectious mononucleosis. And this virus, even though it doesn't cause a very severe disease per se, the consequences of this virus may lead in the genetically prone people, more in women than men, to the development of autoantibodies and eventually autoimmune diseases, classically systemic lupus erythematosus, multiple sclerosis, a disease which affects the brain, and so forth. There is great evidence to the involvement of EB virus as a hyper-stimulating of the immune system in enhancing or inducing the emergence of autoimmune diseases in the genetically prone person, more in women than men. However, during the last 5 years, there was another virus which taught us a lot and showed us how much we do not understand. And this is the COVID virus, the COVID-19. This virus, which we coined the name autoimmune virus, was known to be a very severe hyperstimulating of the immune system, which eventually resulted in what we called cytokine storm. It caused deaths in so many people, especially elderly, obese people, and people with additional risk factors. This virus, like other viruses, to camouflage himself in the evolution, whatever the evolution is with this virus, coated himself with our peptides, which are sequences of amino acid, the ABC of proteins. And therefore, when it enters our body, it's a very strong stimulator of the immune system. But because of the molecular mimicry that he has stolen from our body, actually to protect himself, to camouflage himself, he generated missiles against ourselves. Actually, we have generated the missiles against the virus, but they are misdirected to our own constituent. This is the reason why very early after the virus approached the world, we were the first to publish 27 cases of different autoimmune diseases, and then the literature was flooded with cases of autoimmune conditions that emerged following the virus. In who? In those who were genetically prone to develop, more women than men. And therefore, understanding the role of this virus, we can understand the mechanism of damage that it caused. For instance, one of the autoantibodies which were generated were autoantibodies against some clotting factor in our body, very similar to the antiphospholipid syndrome. So either there were hemorrhages or more clotting in subjects who were exposed to this virus. So today we understand at least one of the most important factors, infectious agents, which now the most notorious is the COVID-19, and it replaced EB virus, the virus of infectious mononucleosis, the kissing disease, as a cause of autoimmune diseases. Understanding this mechanism may help us in similar conditions. So, for instance, we worked for the last 40 years on the association of silicone breast implants in young women at the childbearing ages, which were misbelieved. Maybe it was a mistake, maybe it was deliberately believed like that, that the silicone is inert to the immune system. It does not react with the immune system. And it has been found the opposite. The silicone was found to be very similar, like the COVID-19, as an adjuvant, which comes from the Latin word adjuvare, to help. The silicone exists in the body of the young woman for years, actually more than is instructed. In brackets, most of the surgeons do not instruct that you have to replace it every 6 years, etc. Even when the silicone wrapping is not ruptured, the silicone bleeds, and we found the silicone at the bone marrow, at the vertebral column, and even in the inguinal lymph node. It stimulates the immune system consistently. In whom? In a young women, or those women who are or having a very aggressive immune system. And especially if those women carry also the genetic markers, they will develop these autoimmune diseases. In a large study that we carried out on 20,000 silicone implantee, compare them with 100 young women matched for age without silicone, we found all autoimmune diseases more prevalent among the women with silicone implant.